Hello, everyone, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Ria Stark, and I'm the Digital Engagement Manager here at TLC. And we have such a packed schedule today, so I'm going to keep my introduction a little more brief than usual. So a couple things, TLC recently launched version 5.7.2 for our library.solution integrated library system. And with this release, we have made some powerful changes to LS2 reports, which Faith is going to showcase for us today. Now, we're not going to be able to go through everything from this release because there is a lot. So we already have a few more webinars planned for our customers that we'll announce soon. So keep an eye out on LS Community. And as a reminder, we are recording this and it will be made available afterwards. So you can watch it, you can rewatch it, you can share it with your colleagues, etc. And if you have any questions, please put them into the questions panel. I might bring a few up as we go, but we'll really try to answer the majority of our questions at the end of the webinar. But ask them as you think of them. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our subject matter expert for Library.Solution Reports, Faith Gillum. Thank you so much for joining us for Webinar Wednesday.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining me today. So like we have announced in Library.Solution 5.7.2, we added an additional feature when it comes to for our report authors, and that's framework authoring. But what exactly is framework authoring? Framework authoring is a drag and drop interface where the framework is a organized version of the LS database that puts all those data elements into 4 queries that will capture everything that you would want for your basic and more complex borrower reports, item reports, statistics that are going to be aggregated pre-calculation, and then more detailed statistic reports. The data elements inside of all of these are going to be defined. So like things that are dates are going to be formatted and seen by Cognos, which is our software for LS2 reports. Things that are currency are going to be seen as currency and formatted as expected, and so on. But the most important thing about framework authoring is that it doesn't require SQL knowledge or table joins to create a report. But for those who are using authoring today and are used to SQL, like is SQL still relevant when it comes to report authoring? The short answer is yes. So for all our existing reports, these reports are still going to be written in SQL. So if you want to modify or tune those public report offering to meet your needs, you can do so with your knowledge base. But you can also, with framework, create more sophisticated kind of statistic report and mark reports. In addition, let's say if you're familiar with using expressions or modifying data fields, you can also create new data points inside the framework. For example, like borrower age, where you're taking the date of birth field and then calculating that age from that using a months between expression. You can also do your own kind of custom grouping. So let's say you're a school district and you have like districts, a school system, and you have districts for particular locations. You can create a case statement with your SQL knowledge using the framework, and then creating your own kind of like location groups as its own data object for your reports. I'll be showcasing some of this kind of advanced functionality in the presentation today, but I also will be going into this more detail in a future webinar. But the most important takeaway from this is that although you can use SQL knowledge for framework reports, it is not needed to create reports. So before you can author reports with framework authoring, you need to have 2 things before you can get started. The first thing is that you need to purchase an authoring license for all the report authors that you want to create reports. So this is going to be handled, through sales. So you would reach out to them, and it would be an additional charge. Once you get that purchase, you will receive some training and will also receive documentation to help you create reports. But the second part of that is that you need to make sure that you are on library.solution 5.7.2 or a higher to have access to the framework on your system. Once you do that, in LS2 preferences, you would assign the report's authoring role to a particular user. Once that is assigned, not only will they be able to have access to create reports, but they also will essentially be an administrative level user inside of LS2 reports. They will have full access to the database. They would have ability to modify schedules within LS2 reports for your users, create report depositories, etc. So it's very important, whoever you do have authoring, that they are really familiar with LS2 reports, but also have, the rights and access levels to, access your whole system worth of data. Once you log into LS2 reports, you're going to also make some modification to your account, including your show hidden entries, which I'll showcase just in a second. And then you'll also see the ability, two new features within LS2 reports from the start menu. The first one is Report Studio, which is what our focus is going to be today. Report Studio is basically what the tool that you use to create the majority of the reports in LS2 reports. You can create lists, crosstabs, are also known as pivot tables, and visualizations, whether it's like a pie chart or line graph or any kind of like area map. There's a whole selection within Report Studio that you can use. You also have, as of 5.7.2, access to Dashboard Studio. And this will allow you to create interactive dashboards using the framework. We're using the framework data points. Now, dashboards are more limited in what you can do, given the nature of it being a dashboard. And that will also be covered in a separate webinar because it kind of builds up on some more advanced knowledge. So with that all in place, we're going to go inside of Report Studio so we can kind of see this in action. So from here, I'm going to log in as my report author user here and log in. So let's say this is the first time that I just assigned my user reports authoring user license to this particular user, and it's the first time I'm inside LS2 reports. So like I said in the previous slides, you will need to kind of go in here and update your preferences for your report author. To do so, you click on this little man icon and then go down to My Preferences. And then here you would check Show Hidden Entries. As you can see, it's already been checked. Once you do that, you can have access to what is considered hidden folders. Now, this is a test environment, so there are some additional folders here, but the important one to know about here is going to be your packages folder. This is going to be the underlying data connection that will allow you to create reports. And the one we'll be working from today is LS5X report authoring. Once we have that visible to our user, we also want to just make sure that they have authoring set up. So as you can see here, when I click on the Start menu for New, I have access to Report Studio and the Dashboard Studio. So for me to explain how, the various areas of Report Studio, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a report that I already created in Framework. That way I can explain all the different areas. So then when I create a report for you live on this webinar, you'll have more of an understanding of what areas I'm talking about. So I created this report here and I saved it to my content directory called bars list by age. And I'm going to click on the more and I'm going to select edit the report. This is how you're going to open any report that's existing in library.solution if you want to make any changes to it with your authoring license. So I'm going to click that and it's going to open up to Report Studio. And so right now, what it's giving you is it's giving you this middle section here, which is your workspace, which is what your report consumer is going to see. So as you can see here, I have a header space here with the name of the report. I have a header for my list. I have my various columns that I'm having displayed, my subtotals and totals here. And then I have a footer, but there's nothing here. So this is the main area that you're going to be working from in your screen. Now you have also two other areas that are important. On the left here is what you can call a navigation pane, with the first area being take the icon to take you back to your home screen, so where I was before. The second one underneath that is going to be your data source. So your data pane here, which shows you that you're connected to the authoring framework here, the 5X authoring framework, and then the additional tab that shows you what data points this report is using to generate the results. Below that, you have your toolbox, which basically is the curated objects that you can drag onto the screen here. For whatever area workspace that you're working on. So like in this case, you can, put in a list object, a graph, crosstab, so on. And you have other things for more advanced things like calculations and text and whatnot. The next section here is your page navigation. So in this case, if you're familiar with reports, a lot of our reports have a prompt page and then the results page. So this is a way to kind of be able to navigate between those two spaces without having to kind of, hunt around. So in this case, if I click here on prompt pages, I can see the prompt page. And then if I want to work on the reports results, I can click on that and I can see that from the work area here. The last one is your queries pane here. And this is kind of the back end queries that are running the report. It's kind of similar to the data items here of what elements you're having. But let's say if you want to a more complex report where you have filters and things to kind of filter down your data to make it a smaller data set, you do it on the query level here. So what I'm going to do, and then real quick. And then lastly, the next area is up here, you have to show properties. So there's a lot of things you can do inside of Cognos to make this formatted different ways, like coloring and like how like particular dates look like, or conditional effects you want to do, or even the coloring here. A lot of that is going to be controlled by the show properties. So when you click on an object on a page here, it gives you all the different things that you can do with that object to make it formatted to whatever you want it to be. So with that brief explanation of all the areas inside of Report Studio, we're going to run this report so I can kind of show you the differences with a framework report. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to run this report. And so like our existing reports, you have the ability to run it for a select amount of data, or for like a particular location, or you can create prompts where different users can select different things depending on what they, what they're interested in. So in this case, I'm just going to run this for Washington, and I'm going to bring in all my borrower types, and I'm not going to do the minimum or maximum age filtering just for this example. So from here, you can see you have, your data results in relatively quick manner, and everything is organized based on how the report is designed. But let's say, I want to go in and I only want to target, let's say, women over 40 for, I don't know, some kind of ladies day at the library. So if I were to do that, I can actually filter it from the screen without exporting it into Excel or some other, application. So I can click on here. I get a little pop-up that asks me how I want to, what actions I want to do. I could go here and I could say include female. And so it's going to go through here and it's going to pull everybody that has female filled out on this list. And if I wanted to limit by age, I can do the same thing where I can do greater than and equal to 40, let's say. It gives me a little pop-up, but it will filter that data down as well. And then you can see your filters on here. And that's some of the things that you can do with Framework. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a report for you so you can kind of see how easy it is to do something like this. So let me get out of this and go back to my home screen. So I'm going to go to my Start menu here. Sorry for the taskbar pop-up. And so as you can see first, the first thing that's going to make you pick is a template. By default, library.solution does not have any templates, but you are able to create one if you have create a report as part of the save menu. And I'll show you that after I click blank. So as you can see here, this is kind of why I wanted to show you an existing report, because when you get inside here, as you can see, there's nothing. Like, it's actually quite intimidating when you think about it. You have this complete blank workspace. There's no data points or anything assigned. But thankfully, with training, but also with a little nudge from Cognos here, it kind of starts you off where you need to go. So the data tab source. The data tab pane is already selected with the slide out available for you on the source tab. And this is where you're going to choose your framework authoring package. So we're going to click the plus sign here, and then we're going to get a pop-up, and we're going to scroll down to the packages directory, another reason why we unhide, show hidden folders. And we're going to pick the LS5X report authoring framework. We're going to hit open. It's going to take a little bit sometimes to load. And from here, we have our 4 queries that I was talking about in the previous slide. So the first section is going to be everything that's borrower related. So each of these collapsibles, borrower list report, item list, statistic counts, and statistic lists are their own queries. So you're basically building your report from everything within that's contained in this drop down. So there are going to be some redundancies. Like with our statistics, you're going to see some borrower information in there because it's its own query and you can't pull it from this particular section. But from here, you can see there's going to be a lot more information than it originally looks like it's going to be. So here we have all our basic borrower information that you would see in LS2 staff, including things like, their fine balances and credit balances, how many items they have checked out or overdue. You have responsible party information here. You have additional stats in terms of the lifetime of the borrower, like activities, notification preferences. The list is actually quite long when you start expanding these out. For schools, if you have things like their schedule as particular borrower fields, you have access to that within this drop down. You have borrower address information. Again, another reason why you want to make sure whoever is your report author have the appropriate clearance, because they do have access to personal information like this. Holds information in terms of holds that they placed or that have arrived to that particular borrower. Fine information here with very specific, including like title information and item information. And then items that they have checked out or that's coming in transit to them or whatnot. The same here can be said for like things regarding items. So we have all our basic item information. So your 949 local holdings field information, a lot of that's covered here. You also have format and language. From the 008, you have some statistic information from the system. So like the last time they've been inventoried or checked out. And then stat information on lifetime of that checkouts and circulation is on the item. You have also information, reading level information if that's pertinent to you. And same thing, similar data for your e-resources minus the stats, given that that's going to be coming from your e-resource vendor. I'm not going to go into much detail for statistics because that's going to be focused on more of our advanced report authoring because there's much more involved. But basically for statistics, we have what we call like non-linked statistics. So if you want to get reports based off of like, you know, your most active borrowers that are checking out to kind of do a top list for if you're a school, like a top list readers kind of thing, you can work from this and you don't get any item level information. You just kind of see what collections that they're checking out. Or if you want more detailed information, if they enable checkout stats, you do have these statistic lists reports that show all activity at your location, including things that are like your borrowers added and deleted to your system. Find statistic data, hold statistic data, item circulation, and then you have time dimensions, which allows you to group that data, whether if you want to see things for a calendar year or for particular calendar quarter, by month or by week, etc. So with all that sped through and explain, we're going to start with just creating a list report. So the best thing that I like to do is when I author reports is I try to think of the problem I'm trying to solve. For a lot of schools right now, it's spring break, and as we know it, summer is just around the corner and sometimes faster than we want to expect. So let's say that I want to kind of get a head start on creating kind of like a end of semester report that allows me to see what items that my borrowers have checked out and overdue, so I can kind of, you know, make a friendly kind of ad hoc kind of like email reminder to them or just get some kind of data. So from there, I'm just going to jump in and say I'm super excited. I'm just going to start dragging things onto the screen. Well, I accidentally double clicked, but I'm dragging things to the screen of what I want to see. Now I'm getting this pop up each time I'm adding a new element of saying a new singleton and new query has been created for the object you have inserted. And you're like, whatever, that doesn't mean anything to me, right? But when I run the report, and if I knew my data really well, you would see that although these objects are displaying on the screen, it actually has no relationship to each other. And if we were to click onto the query pane here, we will see that there's actually 3 separate things here that kind of exists in its own private island. They have no relationship to each other. So that's the first takeaway that you need to get when it comes to report authoring, is that you always need to have some kind of container for your data. Think of it kind of like a spreadsheet. Like you don't want to have, you know, 3 different spreadsheets open with, you know, one piece of data in them. You want them all contained in one place. So I'm going to first, before I start anything, I'm going to drag my list object to the screen. Now I'm going to get a pop-up here. Now you don't have to do this, but best practice, especially if you're new, is to kind of name your object and your query. So that way, when you kind of look through the different layers of the report, it's really obvious what relates to what. So I'm going to select OK. Now I have an empty object. And if I go to my queries, you'll see that I also have a query here as well that matches that object name. I have it list borrowers with items out, borrowers with items out. It's all the same thing, right? And now I can start populating it with my actual data. So let me hide that for more space. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to select my borrower name, or sorry, location name, sorry. Then my borrower type, name. And then if this object is already selected, you can also just double click as well if you have something that's really wide. So we're going to do the borrower ID. We're going to do the responsible party name just in case they're minor. Email address, items out, and overdue. All right. And so now I have a very basic report. I'm going to run that just so you could kind of see what it looks like. And with some simple clicks, you have a actionable report, right? You have all these fields, but then you notice it's like, hey, all of these are 0. Well, this is a test database, so there's going to be a lot of people who don't have zeros or don't have items checked out. But we noticed that we could make this a better report by only showing things that have only people who have items out. So if we can do a filter here where we could say greater than 0, it's going to refresh that to give me a list of borrowers that have items checked out. It has email, so we can, export that email list, to give, kind of a mailing list of saying, hey, you have items out, just so you know, summer is around the corner. Maybe you want to come in the library to return your items, right? And we can save that report so that we can, export it or, look at it as needed. But let's say we don't want to have to do this every time. We want it to automatically, have this filter of above 0 items out. So we're going to go back and make this report better by adding filters. So to do that, we go to our query pane again. I'm going to click on the top and we're going to double click on the borrowers with items out. This is why I was saying you want to name things the same thing so you know which one to click. Because if you have a lot of objects, you're going to have a lot of these query objects here. But we're going to click on that. So now we're kind of in the back end. The consumer of the report isn't going to see this. But here we can create our detailed filters. And that's going to be the majority of your filters. You do have summary filters, but we're not going to talk about that in this webinar today. So what is common filters? Well, we have common filters of, let's say we want to limit on location. Now, this is where you're going to have a little bit of SQL knowledge, but basically there's 2 ways you can do a filter. You can do a single relationship where everything has to equal, let's say, Washington, or you can have a list of things that it can equal to. So Washington and Truman. If you only want a single select, you always use the equal sign. If you want multiple, you do and. And it kind of explains that expression inside the help box down below. But then let's say you don't want to have to type in all your locations in this list. You can make it so that it's a prompt like I showcased before. And that is by questioning Cognos, you're asking them a question of what do you want to pick? Well, I want to pick my location, and I end it with a question mark. And that's how you essentially just create a prompt inside of Cognos. You put a question mark before and after whatever you want to name it. And you hit OK. So now when you run the report, it will give you a very makeshift prompt here, already pre-populated so that you can run the report only for Washington, and then you have your data. But you're going to do the same thing for adding filters on other fields as well. So in this case, I'm going to also include where everybody has to have some items out. All right. And you could do this for other things too. You can create a filter based on borrower type the same way, or responsible party. But for the sake of the time, I'm just going to stick with these two for now so that we can kind of start with other things with the report. So now I have my report. It has 2 prompts. I'm running it. I can pick my location. I also specified that it's only going to display people who with items out without having to click anything on here. But I want to do other things as well. I want to do some sorting, but I also kind of want to see what items they do have checked out. And so this is going to take it to the next level, right? So to do that, first, we're going to organize our data. And so the way we can do that, there's actually several ways you can do that. You can either use the show properties, and with selecting the list, group and sort from this pane. Or if you're more comfortable with just actually clicking with your list, you can use the taskbar down below to sort and organize from the column itself. But because what I want to do is going to be a little bit more complex, what I'm going to do, instead of just clicking ascending and on, like borrower location, then borrower type and name, I'm going to select the edit sorting option here. So from here, what this does is it allows you to kind of group your data together and organize it so that if you have like repeated rows, everybody's going to be grouped together. So in this case, I'm going to go in, I'm going to group by my location, then by type, then by borrower. And let's say I want to add also, oh, I didn't add it on this one. I forgot. Oh yeah, so I wanted to group it by borrower location and such, right? And then now it's organized by that. So then when I run the report, it's going to be sorting correctly. So I'm just going to showcase that real quick for you. But what the habit of me constantly going back and forth of running the report and seeing the changes is a great practice to do if you're kind of unfamiliar with the environment, because you could kind of see the changes that you're making to the report like in real time. Because a lot of times, if you don't know your data very well or you're not familiar with authoring, you can kind of get confused on why certain things look certain way. But constantly running the report allows you to kind of see why it may look like that, right? So from here, I have my data organized, right? But in order. So let's say I want to take it a step further and I want to add my items listing, right? So I'm going to go back to my items here and go to my data source. And from here, I want to see what items they also have checked out. So we're going to go down here and we're going to items linked with borrowers, and we're going to select our list. So I can just double click it to bring it in. And we're going to add individual our item elements that we want that's important. So the holdings code, shelf location, title, barcode, the checkout date, due date, and status. And did that get in there? No, it did not. All right. Sorry. Status. There we go. And so now I'm going to have a list when I run the report. Now I have a list of report where I have the borrower here, and then items attached. But there's something wrong here. So as you can see here, for items out, I have 2 items. So 2 items that are either checked out or overdue. But in this case, for this borrower, it's only 2 items checked out. But Nicole has a lot of lost items in the system. So it actually, she shows up for every single time for those 2 items, but also for all these lost items. This is unnecessary noise that for the report, and for this type of report where we're only looking for checked out and overdues, it's not necessary, which means that we need to kind of create another filter here based on status, and that would be, for checked out or overdue. So if we go back here and we go back to our query, you'll see that it now shows the additional columns that I added to the list in this drop-down menu or in this container. And that way we can create our sorry, I'm blanking out, our filter on status. So I'm going to drag it over to detailed filters, and I'm going to, in this case, I could type out like I can with the location. I could type out checked out or an overdue, because that's the things that I want displayed on this particular report. However, to make this report more flexible, maybe I do want to include my lost items. So to give that added flexibility, what I'm going to do is create another prompt. And this by doing in, because I want to be able to select multiple statuses, and then my prompt of question mark status question mark. I'm naming it something different because it's a different filter and it's going to use different information. Now, when I run this again, there's going to be something different about this particular column. You see here, now it's suggesting that I need to type in my statuses. Well, we have some really long statuses, like the lost, long overdue, to lost, automated process. I don't want to have to type that. But Cognos doesn't know that I don't want to type that. So we're going to have to create a prompt page and a smaller query that's going to pull the unique statuses in the system, so then I can get a prompt similar to this location prompt here. And that's the next thing I'm going to do, showcase for you today. So I'm going to get out of that, and I'm going to go to my page, my pages navigation here, and I'm going to click on prompt pages so I can create a prompt page. Going to the toolbox, I'm going to drag page into this container to make a prompt page, double click to get to it. And now I have my basic template for a prompt page. What I like to do for prompts is I like to drag a table, because if you have multiple prompts in objects, to make it look nicer and neater, it's nice to have like a different containers that you can put into it. So I'm just gonna put in some headers here. And then under prompting, because I don't want to type it out each time, I'm going to do value prompt. I already created my filter, so I'm going to use existing. Select location, status. Now when I go, I'm just going to minimize that. Now when I go to show properties for this object, it needs a query to pull that information in. So that's going to be what we do next. So going to the queries, we're going to create two new queries for this, for our location prompt. So I'm going to drag them both in from the toolbox here. And for ease of for ease of use, I'm going to name them. Before adding my data. So I'm just going to double click, go to my data connection here. And then this one is the location prompt. So we're going to go back up here, get our location short, because that is what I'm using in my report. You need to make sure it's the same object that you're using for the prompt. So if I wanted the full name of the borrow location and that's being displayed, I need to use that for the prompt as well. It needs to be a one-to-one relationship. And then we're going to do the same for the statuses. I'm going to go in here, and then under my items linked borrowers, I'm going to find that status column, throw that in here, go back to my prompt. Now that I have those queries assigned or created, I can say location prompt, use the location name short. If I wanted it sorted alphabetically. Same thing for status. Selecting my status prompt query, just saying that I want to pick from a list of statuses, and my statuses are in alphabetical order. So now when I run the report, instead of that makeshift prompt page that Cognos created, I have something that's a little bit cleaner, and I have everything pre-populated here. So do checkout and overdue, hit finish. Now everything here for the items listed for this borrower, Nicole, are only her checked out items. All the lost items are not part of this report anymore. So now now you have a pretty, extensive report. We have the list of items, we have contact information, we have, responsible party information, we have basic, statistics on how many items or counts of how many items out. Now it's just kind of like clean up things. So like, as you can see here, maybe I don't want to have this repeated each time, like her name, for clarity's sake. So I can kind of create a level span here. And to do that, you just click on the column that you want a level span, go to show properties. If you already have this grouping icon available, then what you do is you just go to the group span and you select the one that it's related to. So in this case, it's borrower name. And I'm going to do that for all the borrower information so it only repeats once on the report. Let's go ahead and do that each time. And then same for borrower type. I don't want to have this repeated, so I'm just going to go down to the borrower type level group so it only repeats once. And location, right? So now, as you can see, even on this screen, you see that there's a level span here that equals a certain amount of rows. And that's how it's going to look like on the results. But let's say we want to take it a little bit further. Let's say for location, I want it as a header. So what you can do here is you select your object, then down here, you can, from the taskbar here, you can pick your header and list and headers, pick location, have it here. Say you want to, on the top of the report of the columns, you can change it to that. So it's on the top. Say you want to make this centered. You can do all sorts of things with Cognos to make it look aesthetically pleasing for yourself, and easier to read depending on how you're utilizing the report. And then let's say for our final thing, real quick, let's say we want a count of borrowers, so we can just get a running count. So from here, we can click on a identifier that's going to be unique to the borrower, and then go to our summary from the pop-up taskbar here, do count. It's going to count it by your grouping. We don't need a count by borrower because there's only one ID per borrower name. So we're just going to remove this subtotal. But now we have subtotals by borrower type and by location. And at the very bottom, a grand total. So I'm going to go in just to show you one last time what that information looks like. And as you can see, in about, 20 minutes or so, we went from a 10-minute report that's, you know, relatively simple, to like a 30-minute report. I gotten something that's more advanced that's actionable, and it's right before your eyes. So let's see if this runs. Okay, so here, this person, they have a lot of items. I did say all statuses here, so that's why you see more information. But we have all, you know, this one borrower here. So for Cleveland, page down, and we just have all our report here. So a lot available. So let's go to, and that kind of leads into my next slide, which is sharing and saving reports. So as a report user, you do have access to saving to the public directories as well as your personal directory. And there's 3 areas you can do this in. The first one is My Content. My Content reports are only for personal use. It is linked to your particular user ID, so or user login. So regardless of if you are sharing a direct link to the report or you create a report view that exists in your My Content directory folder, no one else can see that but you. So unless you don't want to share your reports, it's best not to save to this directory if you have the intention of sharing it. The next section is the customer library authored reports. Now, if TLC creates a report for you that's custom, this is a directory that we place it in, but also we encourage authors to save to this directory as well, because it's one of the, while TLC does back up your server, especially if you're hosted, this is the directory that is part of the migration that is getting copied and, you know, saved when it's exported to the next version. So it's a great place to store your reports if you want to make sure that, you know, it's safe. And then the next, the last directory is your frequently used reports. And so this is the intention of kind of, you know, creating your spot within team content that is accessible to for all your users, so that they know what reports they can use. So I'm kind of showcase that with this report today. So this report, let's say I really like it and I want to have other people use it. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to save that report to my customer library report, end of semester, and hit save. So now we have this report saved. If we want to also create it as a template, we can do so here, if you like this kind of look or style, but I'm not going to do that. And then from there, anytime anyone needs access to the report, it's available as the public offering. So end of the semester. Now let's say I want to share it, right? I'm going to show you 2 examples here for you. So I have a report, my borrowers list by age. Let's say I want to share that report, which you can't do from My Content. But I'm going to create a report view to the frequently used report, and I'm just going to put it on the top level here, and hit save. And then for this end of semester report that I created, where is it? I'm going to create another report view in the frequently used reports. And let's say in this case, I have many different curated reports and I really want to make it clear to my report users. I can create a new folder here, must run reports, that kind of, you know, signals who should run it. And then I can save those reports in those directories. But when I go here, I'm going to log out as my report author. And I'm going to log in as my basic user. And I'm going to go, because as I was instructed, I want to see these 2 new reports that I was told that are so great, right? So I'm going to try to run this first one, borrowers list by age. This is the report that was currently residing in that report's author's My Content. If I go to run it, it's going to give me an error. Why? Because I don't have permission to that directory. So this is what I was talking about. If you want to share it, you can't share it in My Content. The only way for me to have access to My Content is if I log in as that particular user. Now, for must run reports, that report that was saved inside of customer library author reports, if I click that, I'm able to run that report. Sorry. And now you can see my data. I don't know why my taskbar is open now. But anyway, that is essentially it for report framework authoring. Are there any questions?
Hey, Faith, that was a great presentation, and it was super thorough to be able to see everything from the report studio. We have gotten a number of questions, and I'm going to try to summarize all of them. But before we do, I did get one that while you're sharing your screen, I think you might be able to answer, and then we'll jump into some polls. So this first one is, can you email directly from the report using that email data point, or do you have to download the report?
Oh, you mean like mail merge from the report? No, you would still need to export it out and have that functionality to do a mail merge, like from Excel or something like that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that one came in right when you were demonstrating that, so I wanted to get that in first. We do have a lot of other questions coming in. I will get to those in just a second, but before we do, to give folks a chance to ask any more questions, get those into the questions panel, we are going to launch a couple of polls. So we want to know who our audience is today. So the first one you're going to see on your screen is, how do you currently use reports in your library? Are you the person that's writing, running, possibly curating reports for your whole system? Are you the person that's running reports just for your specific location, whether it's your library branch or your school? Or are you the person that receives reports from someone else in the system? Are you just looking at the data once it's already been created? Or maybe you're the person that doesn't use reports, but you're just here because you want to learn more. So I'll give you all a moment to answer that poll. One of the questions that has been coming in, I'll just kind of address while this is on the screen. Folks are asking if authoring licenses are additional, and they're asking for information about pricing. So what I'm going to share is, yes, that authoring is an add-on, and if you want more information about that, we can put together a quote for you. It's very custom based on kind of the reporting that you're going to be using. So the next question that comes up, hit yes to it and we'll talk more about it. We also had a question come up about the slide deck and whether that would be made available. And yes, we can provide the slides when we provide the recording. And this is being recorded. You'll be able to watch it and rewatch it with time. All right, our results are in. The majority of our audience, 52%, are the ones running, writing, and curating reports. And then 41% are the ones running them for a specific location. So great, glad to see you all here. And one more poll for you today, and then I promise I'll jump more into the Q&A portion. Which is whether or not you would like more information from TLC. So if that was one of you who said that you want to know more about pricing, or you have a question that maybe we can't get to today because we're going to end right at the hour, go ahead and hit yes, and we will be sure to follow up after the session. So with that, I'm going to go through some of the questions that came in earlier while this is on the screen. Faith, what version of library.solution is required to use the framework authoring?
That would be 5.7, 5.7.1 or 5.7.2, which is the current version of library.solution.
And that was just announced, the release this week. So if you want to get on 5.7.2, go ahead and submit an upgrade ticket, and we'll be sure to get you in the queue for that. The next question is, will there still be pre-made public reports that we can just edit to meet our needs instead of totally building from scratch?
Yes, this is just in addition, this is another feature in addition to our standard reports. And so those standard reports are going to be in SQL. So you won't be able to use the framework to kind of modify that. But if you're doing things like adding columns or deleting columns or like adding totals to things, you can still do that with the SQL public reports.
And can you talk a little bit about custom reports as well and how that's different from both the pre-made reports and this new report authoring?
Okay, so public reports are going to be the reports that are part of your library.solution release. So they're going to be canned reports. So when you're in here under like team content and you need reports on these various areas, you have all these reports to choose from and you can run them and they all have like, prompt pages depending on you know, what you're trying to do with that data, right? So those are part of library.solution. There's no extra fee for these reports, and there's over 200 reports. So there's a large variety of reports to choose from. Now, for custom reports, let's say you have a state report and there's like a lot of different data elements that you want to get on a yearly basis that you don't want to have to run like 20 different reports for, or or there's some kind of way you're breaking down the data that isn't standard across our customer base, so there isn't a public report for. That's where a custom report will come in. And so what it is it's usually just a flat $50 fee for for each report, and I would be the one creating that report for you based on your specifications. So it's basically you don't purchase authoring, you purchase my time to create the report for you. And then for authoring is the, fee for that particular license. And then what that does is it allows you to create your own reports using the either, oh, this is the report user still. Let me log off so I can get back into it. Um, but it'll give you access to Report Studio and Dashboard Studio, so you can create your own reports using your own data, because like what you're looking for most of the time, so you can create your own report that way.
Great. Thank you so much, Faith. And yes, it's definitely worth the time. Faith is the expert here to be able to create those for you. We did have a couple more questions about pricing. We'll follow up after the webinar for you. And we had one that is slightly off topic, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And then we'll go ahead and close out. So this last one is, are there any plans to include borrower data in LS2 staff lists and actions sometime in the future?
Yes. Um, it is a topic for future development to have borrower listen actions as well as item level listen actions. But we don't have an exact timeline for release.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Faith. I think I got all the questions. If I missed yours, I'm very sorry. We'll review these afterwards and follow up with anyone I may have missed. But I'll have you go back to our last slide for me. And before you log out today, be sure to grab the handouts for more information. If you're looking for more content, we will have those available on LS Community as well. So we're going to do 2 more webinars after this one for our customers. So watch for that announcement on LS Community. And this is recorded. You can catch the recording tomorrow at tlcdelivers.com/webinars, as well as grab any of those handouts as well. I did see one last question come in, but I'll ask it quickly. It is, I'm seeing active holdings code while TLC has requested we always use owning holdings code. I thought you used active when it's temporary using another holdings. Is that correct?
Owning holdings code is where it's like, the permanent resident of that item. Active is it's circulating in a different location, that would be your active. But if your owning location, or if your owning holdings code hasn't changed when you're circulating it, it's also your active. So for reports, active holdings code basically means what the current collection it belongs to when you run the report.
Okay. Great. Thanks for that last minute question right in at the hour. Thank you everybody so much for joining us today. Stay tuned for the next webinars, and we'll be following up with those of you who asked for a follow-up. So thank you everybody, and we will see you in our next webinar. Thank you, Faith, for your time.
Thank you.